I'd like to introduce Jeanette Winterson, who's very kindly agreed to open the exhibition for us formally tonight. She, as I'm sure you know, is one of the country's leading writers. She came to fame with her first semi-autobiographical novel, Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit, published in 1985. Her most recent work, The Gap of Time, a reimagining of Shakespeare's The Winter's Tale, appeared last year. In 2012, she published the novella, The Daylight Gate, and this book explores the life and trial of the Pendle Witches and features none other than John Dee as one of its characters. So Jeanette, welcome and thank you very much.
Right, let's see if this works, because I'm not very tall. So this is an exhibition about books. John Dee loved books. Knowing that I loved my books is how Shakespeare has Prospero explain the coup against him that drives him out of Milan with nothing but his library. Easy to plot against a man whose head is in his books. Or is it? If it's true that John Dee was the template for Prospero, then unlike that other possibility, Dr. Faustus, Prospero wins the day, and he does it by magic. His desert island disc's banishment home becomes a magnet that draws to it his usurping brother and crew. And with a little help from the tempest of the title, everybody lands up where Prospero wants them to be, rather like tonight. And then the play plays out. So what was Shakespeare doing, messing around with the just dead John Dee? Well, let's have a look at where we are in time and space. So 1609, John Dee drops dead. And it's been quite a time of it in England. 1603, Gloriana, the old queen, is dead. John Dee had been the astrologer, the mathematician, the magician to the Queen. He'd even advised, as you've seen, on the date of her coronation, last week in fact, January 15th, give or take a few hundred years. And he masterminded the Armada, and he gave masterclasses in navigation to captains hunting for new worlds. He even helped Burbage build Shakespeare's theatre. And the Queen, she liked Dee. Now, he signed himself 007. The 7, both the magic number and the way he signed it, looking like the symbol for a square root. The O's are eyes. Dee might have been a spy. The Queen was bookish. She visited Dee's library in Mortlake, books and manuscripts on mathematics, astronomy, architecture, musical instruments, medical instruments, the classics in Greek and Latin. Every book a world of thought, the biggest and best private library anywhere. Never mind the Medicis hanging out with Nostradamus. John Dee had it nailed, except that he didn't. As you saw, while he was away in Poland, hopelessly trying to turn iron or iron ore into gold, his library, accidentally on purpose, was ransacked. But if it hadn't been, maybe we wouldn't be here tonight. Maybe all of his books would have been lost, not variously salvaged in a tomcat and skedaddle way as books appeared and disappeared eerily, like the supernatural world that fascinated Dee. Why? Why would a brilliant mathematician like Dee, a man of real knowledge, a pioneer of natural science, why would he be consumed to know the language of angels, to haruspicate and scry, to share his table, even his wife, with a fraudster called Edward Kelly, who claimed to hear voices from the other side? But these guys mislead us because the past isn't the present as costume drama. The past is another country, and they do things differently there. Understanding is more than knowing the facts. Understanding is an imaginative capacity. And that's what Dee had. So we're back in our timeline. The old Queen's dead. James VI of Scotland takes the throne of England and Wales, and the first thing that he does in 1604 is pass the Witchcraft Act. It is an offence, punishable by death, to conjure a spirit. James was obsessed with magic, witchcraft, sorcery, conjuring. Shakespeare wrote Macbeth with its witches and prophecies and apocalyptic fallout, because he knew the king would like it, and his company was, by now, Shakespeare ever the pragmatist, the king's men. But maybe James had justified paranoia. He believed that witches had caused a storm to try and shipwreck his wife as she was sailing towards England from the coast of Denmark. And in 1605, he'd survived the Gunpowder Plot. So, unsurprisingly, the other thing that James was obsessed with, apart from sorcery, was a Catholic uprising. And England was still struggling then with a faith war about worship and cultural values that maybe makes more sense to us now as we battle with our own unwelcome and unexpected questions about freedom of worship, assimilation, loyalty to country and crown, or faith, because time comes round again, something John Dee really understood. And like the rest of his generation and Shakespeare's, Dee's parents were brought up in a Catholic country. This one, England. Laws happen on the stroke of midnight, but hearts and minds change much more slowly. Imagine a time when monasteries had both libraries and centres of learning. And imagine a king, that one, Henry VIII, ransacking the lot. John Dee's library then becomes a secular monastery. Rare, precious, precarious. Because this was a time when everything could be taken away if a power wished it to be taken away. Lives, livelihoods, books. Dee was arrested more than once, accused of heresy, accused of sorcery. He knew that nothing is solid, nothing is fixed. And that brings me to alchemy, the forerunner of chemistry, easy to dismiss now as a hodgepodge of magical thinking and ignorance. In the popular imagination, the male headline would have read, "Iron is the new gold." Because it seemed that all alchemists ever did was to try for get-rich-quick schemes. And it's true that Dee spent a lot of human hours trying to turn iron or iron ore into gold, because he believed, not wrongly as it turns out, that matter doesn't really exist. E equals mc squared, the relationship between mass and energy, was something alchemy understood intuitively. It goes back to Ovid's Metamorphoses, so I'll use Ted Hughes' translation right at the beginning. Now I am ready to tell how bodies are changed into other bodies. That the world had hurled pell-mell into forms as diverse as cauliflowers, men and mountains, but all sharing more of the same stuff than they were made of different stuff. Well, that was a principle that got knocked out in both the hierarchy of religious thinking, man is special, and later in the emerging science and philosophy of the Enlightenment. Look, Descartes is on his way with his powerful notions of mechanisms, separations, binaries, and the vast advances of science will depend on recognizing the singular, the isolate. Medical science will dissect and distinguish, politically too. This is the beginning of the individual. You see what I'm saying? Since relativity, since the beginning of the 20th century, we've had to start a return to connectedness. Okay, that's not entirely true, because anyone reading that astonishing final paragraph of The Origin of Species, 1859, about the interdependency of life, that strange paean and hymn to beauty that Darwin gives at the end, must continually wonder what cast of mind preferred the headline, "Survival of the Fittest." But anyway, the point is that Dee was more of a Neoplatonist than he was either a Catholic or a Protestant. Yes, he believed in God and angelic beings, just like everybody else did at the time. But he also believed in the possible to be revealed wholeness of the universe, and it wasn't clockwork. It was dynamic. And if all forms were related, then why could not iron become gold? Wasn't it just a matter of dissolution and reformation? But there's something more to say, separate to the dodgy chemistry. Alchemy is a philosophical position too. The base metal is us. The gold is also us. What is really being tested and refined is the soul. I wrote a kid's book about this called The Battle of the Sun, if you want alchemy for beginners. But if you really want to get to the bottom of it, you'll have to do Carl Jung alchemical studies. But Dee was excited by concepts, by theories, by possibilities. The manufacture of gold was a sideline, a way of funding his work. When he came back from Poland and he found his library pillaged, did he find consolation in the Neoplatonist doctrine that none of this really exists anyway? They didn't know that the atom is made of empty space and points of light. But that's what they were saying. And it's what Shakespeare's saying through Prospero in The Tempest. Be cheerful, sir. Our revels now are ended. These, our actors, as I foretold you, were all spirits and are melted into air, into thin air. And like the baseless fabric of this vision, the cloud-capped towers, the gorgeous palaces, the solemn temples, the great globe itself, yea, all which it inherit shall dissolve. And like this insubstantial pageant faded, leave not a rack behind. We are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded by a sleep. John Dee, miserable, penniless, took a job at the Collegiate Church in Manchester, where he renewed his efforts to discover the Philosopher's Stone. He thought Manchester might do it for him. He had a feeling about the place, even though he was unhappy there. But here's the strange thing, he was just a couple of 100 years too early. Manchester became its own Philosopher's Stone, the richest city in the world, known as the Golden Sewer, because of its filth and pollution and wretchedness, what the alchemists called the Negredo, but transformed by a powerful alchemy the world had never seen before. He thought too, John Dee, that he might discover the elixir of life. Queen Elizabeth had asked him to do that. And he was interested in making a man, a homunculus, a creature not born of woman. Well, there's a lot of money in medicine chasing womb-free births, either by cloning or darker methods. And our rush to manage artificial intelligence isn't that far from the dream of creating a life form independent of the usual biological processes. And if we can't yet live forever, cryonics is doing its best to freeze us in the nick of time so that we can be reinvented later. And that headline dream of the alchemists, turn base metal into gold, we've seen it. It started in the Industrial Revolution. And our present mad desire to turn all of the planet and all of its peoples into one vast money-making machine is alchemy on steroids. Whatever it is, monetize it. The three dreams of alchemy became the obsessions of the modern world. But I want to end where we began, with books, knowing that I loved my books. Libraries are disappearing again. Soon, only the better off will have books or access to books. And we're told this won't matter because everybody will have the internet. Books are a format. What they contain is what counts. Content can be delivered in other ways. Yes, it can. And individually, that argument is fine. I love it. I can download a book that I need. But I can't download a library I need, public or private. Books on shelves have a way of regrouping themselves in the minds of the curious. the unrelated becomes related, like Darwin's riverbank, or John Dee's search through the arcane and the mundane, looking always for connections, the ones computer programs can't make. And that is why an exhibition like this is so important. What remains of John Dee's books is a reminder of what has been lost. What remains is a reminder that destruction is always to be regretted, whether in the name of war or in the name of progress. We are human beings, such stuff as dreams are made on. But at our best, when allowed to be odd, curious, absorbed, experimental, defiant, willing to take risks, loving something more than life itself at any price, knowing that I loved my books. John Dee is a talismanic figure, that is, a magically charged property, because he transcends himself and his epoch, because he is a time traveller, after all. Enigmatic, so clever, fiercely himself, he stands as an invitation and a warning. He failed, but failure is not humiliation. Remember Sam Beckett? Fail. Fail again. Fail better. We are more successful than Dee in our application of knowledge, but we are not better failures. By which I mean, his invitation and his warning is really the same thing. Outcomes are less important than the work itself. Thank you.